I died, and Jesus showed me the one prayer that could cost you everything in the end times. Not because it's evil, but because it reveals disobedience in disguise. I'm Sheila Spencer, a 43-years-old former nurse who clinically died for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. What Jesus showed me during that time shattered everything I thought I knew about faith, prayer, and spiritual warfare. Jesus didn't just give me a vision, he gave me a warning for you. If you think you're ready for what's coming, think again. Please watch till the end, because what Jesus revealed to me could literally save your life and your loved ones. But before we start, please let me know where you're listening from. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like and comment on what you thought about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other on this channel. Enjoy listening. It was December 17th, 2023. I had been working double shifts at the hospital for weeks during a severe flu outbreak. I remember feeling unusually tired that morning, but I brushed it off as simple exhaustion. By midday, I developed a strange heaviness in my chest that I initially ignored. As a healthcare professional, you'd think I would have recognized the warning signs, but we're often the worst patients. By evening, the pain had become unbearable. My husband David found me collapsed on our bathroom floor, struggling to breathe. The last thing I remember was the paramedics lifting me onto a stretcher, oxygen mask over my face, and David's terrified expression as he held my hand. "Stay with me, Sheila," he kept saying. But I couldn't. The darkness came fast, pulling me under like a powerful current. What the doctors later told me was that I had experienced a massive pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that traveled to my lungs. My heart stopped for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Clinically dead. But what happened during those minutes was more real than anything I've ever experienced in my 43 years of life. I didn't see a tunnel or bright light like you hear about in other near-death experiences. Instead, there was an immediate shift, like stepping from one room into another. The pain was gone. All physical sensation disappeared. And there he was, waiting for me. Jesus. Not as a distant figure or a vague presence. He was right there, more vivid and real than any person I've encountered in my physical life. His eyes held both infinite compassion and something else, urgency. He didn't waste time with pleasantries or explanations about what had happened to me. Instead, he immediately said, "Sheila, I've brought you here because there's something my children need to know, something most of them are getting dangerously wrong." The way he looked at me, it was like he could see straight through to every thought I'd ever had, every doubt, every fear. Yet there was no judgment in his gaze, only love so intense it would have knocked me to my knees if I'd still been in my physical body. "You will return," he said, "and you must tell them what I'm about to show you. Many lives depend on it." Then, without warning, everything around us transformed. We were standing on what seemed like a vast plateau overlooking the world, not as it is now, but as it will be. What I saw sent chills through my spirit. Cities in chaos. People in panic. A figure rising to power who radiated such convincing charm and charisma that masses were drawn to him like moths to flame. "Watch carefully," Jesus said, his voice gentle but firm. "What you're seeing is what's coming." I noticed something strange about this charismatic leader. While outwardly he appeared benevolent and trustworthy, there was something deeply wrong beneath the surface, like looking at a beautiful painting that conceals something rotten behind it. People were captivated by him, desperate for the security and solutions he promised. "Who is he?" "The one Scripture calls the man of lawlessness," Jesus replied. "The son of destruction who opposes and exalts himself above everything that is called God or is worshipped." His words echoed 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 3 to 4 perfectly. I watched as this man gradually shifted from offering hope to demanding allegiance. Those who questioned him were first marginalized, then actively persecuted. Systems were established to monitor compliance. Choices became increasingly limited. "This is the Antichrist," I whispered, the reality of what I was witnessing sinking in. "Yes," Jesus confirmed. "And this is where my followers make a critical mistake." The scene shifted again. I could see groups of believers responding in different ways. Some were organizing resistance movements. Others were stockpiling weapons and supplies. Many were publicly denouncing him, standing in town squares proclaiming truth. All of them appeared brave, righteous in their conviction. Aren't they doing what's right? Standing up for truth? Fighting evil? Jesus looked at me with such sadness that it pierced my heart. Watch what happens to them. What followed was devastating. Those who chose to fight were systematically identified, isolated, and eliminated. Their resistance accomplished nothing except their own destruction. Despite their courage and conviction, they were simply overwhelmed. But why? Why would you allow this to happen to people trying to stand for you? That's when Jesus revealed something that shook me to my core, something I'd never heard in any sermon, never read in any book about end-time prophecy. I never told them to fight, he said simply. I told them exactly what to do, but they chose to follow their own understanding instead of my clear instructions. Jesus then directed my attention to Matthew 24. The words appear before us as if written in light. When you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. This isn't a symbolic language or a parable, Jesus explained. This is my direct command. When this specific event occurs, when the abomination stands in the holy place, my followers are not to resist, not to fight, not to take back anything. They are to flee immediately. I was stunned. But so many believe they're called to stand and fight against the Antichrist, I said. This is where human pride distorts my word, Jesus replied firmly. I never called my followers to wage physical war against the Antichrist. That battle belongs to me alone. What I commanded was immediate escape, no hesitation, no looking back, not even pausing to gather possessions. What Jesus showed me next was remarkable. He highlighted those believers who actually heeded his warning. When the moment came, when the abomination appeared, these faithful ones didn't organize protests or arm themselves for resistance. Without hesitation, they left everything behind and fled as instructed. What are they supposed to pray about at this moment? Jesus' answer surprised me. Notice what I actually told them to pray about in Matthew 24 verse 20. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. I didn't tell them to pray about whether to flee, that command was already given. I told them to pray about the circumstances of their flight. This insight hit me with incredible force. Jesus wasn't suggesting prayer about the action itself. The instruction to flee was non-negotiable. The only appropriate prayer concerned the timing and conditions. Sheila, Jesus continued, his voice intensifying, this is the one thing I specifically did not tell my followers to pray about, whether or not to flee when this moment comes. I already gave the command. The decision is made. Those who pause to pray about whether they should obey will lose precious time they cannot afford to lose. I watched as those who fled made it to safety, remote areas, wilderness regions, just as Revelation 12 verse 6 describes. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. This isn't coincidence, Jesus explained. I prepare places of refuge beforehand for those who trust my instructions completely. Meanwhile, those who stayed behind to fight the good fight found themselves trapped in a system designed to identify and crush resistance. Many were captured. Some denounced their faith under pressure. Others died as martyrs but accomplished little for the kingdom because their sacrifice came from disobedience, not obedience. But shouldn't we stand against evil? Standing against evil doesn't always look like direct confrontation, Jesus replied patiently. Remember Joseph? He stood against evil by running from Potiphar's wife. David stood against evil by refusing to kill Saul when he had the chance. Even I withdrew when crowds sought to harm me before my appointed time. Sometimes the greatest act of spiritual warfare is simple obedience, even when that obedience means retreat. What Jesus showed me next completely transformed my understanding of Revelation. He took me forward in time to the final battle, Armageddon. But what I saw wasn't what I expected. The faithful believers weren't on the battlefield wielding weapons. Only Jesus himself, seated on a white horse, eyes like flames of fire, with the armies of heaven behind him. Watch carefully, he instructed. The battle, if you could even call it that, was over almost instantly. The beast and the false prophet were captured and thrown into the lake of fire. The armies that had gathered against Jesus were defeated by the mere breath from his mouth, just as 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 8 describes. This is what most of my followers miss completely, Jesus said. They think they're called to defeat the Antichrist themselves, through political action, through resistance movements, through physical force. But from the beginning, this was always my battle to fight, not theirs. I was beginning to understand. Their job wasn't to stay and fight, it was to endure until you returned to fight for them. Exactly, Jesus nodded. Revelation 13 verse 10 makes this clear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. Then it says, this calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Not resistance, not rebellion, patient endurance and faithfulness. Jesus then revealed something that broke my heart, how this misunderstanding would lead many sincere believers astray in the final days. They will convince themselves they're being courageous, he said sadly. They'll quote scripture about standing firm against the enemy. They'll rally others to resist. And in doing so, they'll be directly disobeying my explicit command. This isn't a test of courage, it's a test of obedience. I saw families torn apart over this very issue, some choosing to flee as instructed, others staying to fight the good fight. Churches are divided between those preparing resistance and those preparing escape routes. Communities fractured by competing interpretations of how to respond when the abomination appears. How will people know for certain when this moment comes? How will they recognize the abomination of desolation? Jesus explained that the abomination would involve the desecration of the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. The Antichrist would set up something profoundly blasphemous in the holy place, declaring himself to be God and demanding worship. This singular event would be the unmistakable trigger point. When this happens, Jesus emphasized, there will be no time for debate, no time for committee meetings, no time for theological discussion. Those who hesitate even briefly will find escape routes cut off. What struck me most was the tenderness in Jesus' voice even as he delivered these stern warnings. This wasn't about condemning those who got it wrong, it was about protecting his beloved children from unnecessary suffering. Sheila, he said, taking what felt like my hands in his, most of my followers have been taught that the bravest thing they can do is stand and fight. But true courage is sometimes found in the willingness to flee when I command it, to trust me even when it contradicts everything the world has taught them about heroism. Jesus then showed me the stark difference between those who obeyed the command to flee and those who didn't. The obedient ones found themselves in protected wilderness areas where God provided for them supernaturally, reminiscent of how he provided manna for the Israelites in the desert. Despite initial hardship, they experienced supernatural peace and provision. Notice how they overcome, Jesus pointed out, directing me to Revelation 12 verse 11. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Their victory didn't come through fighting or resistance, Jesus explained. It came through remaining faithful to their testimony and being willing to lose everything, even life itself, rather than compromise. This revelation continued to unfold as Jesus showed me specific scenarios that would play out during this time. I saw how the Antichrist system would make it increasingly difficult to buy or sell without accepting his mark. I saw faithful believers choosing extreme hardship over compromise. I saw communities of the obedient sharing what little they had, supporting one another through the tribulation. The world will call them cowards for running, Jesus said, but I call them wise for listening. Remember the 5 wise virgins who brought extra oil? This is similar, those who prepare according to my instructions, not according to human wisdom. Jesus spent what felt like hours walking me through specific predictions about how events would unfold, correcting common misconceptions about end-time prophecy. He emphasized repeatedly that the greatest danger wasn't physical persecution, but spiritual deception. The Antichrist's most powerful weapon isn't force, it's pride, Jesus explained. He will appeal to people's desire to be heroes, to fight back, to take control. And in their pride, Many will ignore my clear instructions and choose their own path instead. Jesus showed me how this deception would be so convincing that, as Matthew 24 verse 24 warns, if it were possible, even the elect would be deceived. The lies would be packaged in language that sounds biblical, wrapped in appeals to courage and righteousness. Those who truly know my voice, Jesus said, who have practiced obedience in the small things, they will recognize the deception and choose simple obedience over impressive-looking rebellion. As our time together began drawing to a close, Jesus became even more direct. He showed me that the spiritual preparation for this time needed to begin now, not when the crisis arrives. Tell them to prepare in these 7 ways, he instructed me. First, know my word deeply, not just as information but as living truth. Those who merely skim scripture will miss crucial details that could save their lives. Second, practice immediate obedience now, in the small daily choices. Those who habitually delay obedience, who negotiate with my commands in everyday life, will find it impossible to obey instantly when it matters most. Third, learn to recognize my voice above all others, above respected leaders, above convincing arguments, above emotional appeals. In the final days, many voices will claim to speak for me. Only those intimately familiar with my true voice will discern the difference. Fourth, release your attachment to possessions, to status, to the approval of others. Those who cling tightly to what they have will hesitate when called to leave it all behind. Fifth, build genuine community with other believers who are equally committed to truth. In the chaos of the end times, you will need each other desperately. Sixth, guard against pride in all its forms. Spiritual pride will be the downfall of many otherwise faithful believers who think they know better than my direct commands. Finally, focus on endurance rather than resistance. The calling is not to prevent the tribulation, but to remain faithful through it. Jesus then looked at me with such intensity that it felt like fire passing through my soul. Sheila, when you return, many will dismiss what you've seen. Some will mock you. Others will twist your words to fit their existing beliefs. But some, those whose hearts are truly open, will hear the truth in what you share. He placed his hands on what felt like my shoulders. Remember this above all, I never call my people to fight battles I have promised to fight for them. Their victory comes not through physical strength but through humble obedience. With those words, everything began to fade. The last thing I remember was Jesus saying, "Tell them, Sheila. Tell them to be ready to run when I say run, to stay when I say stay. Tell them that in the end, obedience matters more than heroism." Then suddenly, painfully, I was back in my body. The first thing I heard was a doctor shouting, "We've got her back." The bright lights of the emergency room blinded me. The pain in my chest was excruciating as my lungs struggled to take in oxygen. Everything Jesus had shown me remained crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from the pulmonary embolism that nearly took my life. During that time, I couldn't stop thinking about everything Jesus had revealed to me. I knew I had to share it, even though I understood many would dismiss it as oxygen deprivation or medication-induced hallucination. If you take nothing else away from my testimony, remember this one critical truth. When the abomination of desolation appears, Jesus did not tell us to pray about whether to flee. He commanded instant obedience. He said, "Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Not fight. Not resist. Not praying about it. Flee. Jesus isn't looking for heroes who will stand their ground against the Antichrist. He's looking for faithful servants who will trust his instructions completely, even when those instructions contradict everything the world has taught us about courage. Because sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do isn't to stand and fight, it's to run as fast as you can in the direction God is pointing. My near-death experience changed everything for me. I no longer fear death. I no longer worry about looking brave in the eyes of others. My only concern now is simple, immediate obedience to whatever Jesus asks of me. Because in the end, that's the only thing that will matter. When Jesus returns on that white horse described in Revelation 19, with eyes like blazing fire and the armies of heaven behind him, he won't ask, "Did you fight the Antichrist for me?" He'll ask, "Did you listen when I told you exactly what to do?" I pray we all have the right answer when that day comes. I'm not special. I'm just a regular person who died for 4 minutes and 37 seconds and came back with a message that could save countless lives when the final days arrive. A message about the one thing Jesus said not to pray about when the end comes. Will you listen?